This video is a critical wrap-up of 20th century media theories from my theoretical perspective. Let's begin with a fake quote from Marshall McLuhan. "We shape our tools, and thereafter they shape us." While this isn't a direct quote from McLuhan, it nevertheless sums up two central points of his media theory. First, he conceives of media as a new kind of tools. And then second, the use of these tools shapes, or at least helps shaping, human identity. This is to say, human identity is neither any essential, common, or unalienable human nature, as supposed, for instance, in traditional mainstream Western philosophy. Nor is it, as today's mainstream woke discourse often suggests, something deeply personal that makes each individual special. To the contrary, identity is historically contingent and fluent, and importantly, it has a lot to do with the tools and technologies and with the media people use. Going a step beyond McLuhan, we can say that the technologies humans invent and use correspond to, metaphorically speaking, the technologies we use to construct our identity. The use of our tools shapes our sense of self, and our sense of self shapes the use of our tools. Since our most frequently used tools today are media tools, since our technology is media technology, we can say media and identity technologies are looped. We can distinguish three identity technologies. There may well be more, and there are many overlaps between them, but I focus on three: sincerity, authenticity, and profilicity. In many traditional societies, identity was shaped in orientation to social roles. These roles were, for instance, gender or family roles, like mother and father, or class roles, like peasant and landowner, or professional roles, like carpenter or fisherman. Concretely, one became who one was by sincerely committing in what one does, things and feels, to these roles. This is why Paul D'Ambrosia and I, following Lionel Trilling, call it sincerity. Sincerity is identity building in orientation to roles. Tools corresponded to the differences between roles. Women's tools differed from men's tools. Peasants' tools differed from aristocrats' tools. Carpenter's tools differed from fishermen's tools. Of course, there was some overlap, and just as one could have various roles, one could use various sets of tools. But generally, tools were related to roles and contributed to shaping and validating one's identity. In modernity, society became more dynamic. Of course, there are still mothers and fathers today, and peasants and aristocrats, and carpenters and fishermen. But society got more complicated. The economy, for instance, produced new differences between rich and poor that didn't neatly fit the old feudal divisions. And with the decline of religion, new social systems emerged, including, for instance, modern education, science, the modern legal system, and the modern mass media. Old technologies became increasingly ineffective, and in the course of industrialization were replaced by new technologies. Similarly, the identity technology of sincerity became increasingly old-fashioned and was challenged by a new identity technology. Again, following Lionel Trilling, Paul D'Ambrosia and I call it authenticity. We define authenticity as the pursuit of originality. The modern individual has to be unique. Everyone is now supposed to be somehow different. And the commitment to traditional roles can be considered as a lack of originality or mere conformity. Conformity became a bad word. As the pursuit of originality, authenticity highlights individual agency. The new personal self, once discovered or created, has to be empowered. And importantly, it has to express itself. Industrialization and modern science paved the way for innovations of an unprecedented scale. Lots of new tools were invented. And many of these tools were no longer tied to specific roles. In line with a capitalist logic, it made sense to develop tools that could be bought and used by everyone, regardless of their gender, class, or profession. A core industry of modernity is mass transport. Trains and ships became accessible to everyone. Everyone could move in a seemingly individual fashion. Movement was no longer tied to social roles, but became personal. Cars or planes became important tools supporting individual movement and making it authentic rather than sincere. Instead of going on pilgrimages as prescribed by religious roles, people would now pursue their originality by traveling to ever more authentic tourism spots. The means of transport were called means of communication. And this brings us to modern media and media technology. Modern technologies revolutionized reading and writing. Books lost their connection with religious roles and became early mass media. Reading skills spread, and soon novels became fashionable, many of which previously unthinkable were written and read by women. Everyone could pursue their authenticity by reading books on their own. And what is more, many of those stories that people read were about individuals rebelling against conformity and finding their authenticity. The modern novel was an authenticity fest. As Niklas Luhmann said, early mass media, such as novels, provided clues for personal identity work. Other than in the old days of sincerity, individuals could no longer derive their identity from their descent. Instead of using descent or Herkunft for their identity shaping, people could now try out virtual realities they encountered in the media. Beyond building a sense of self, in line with the examples one could find in a Bildungsroman, authenticity entered into an even deeper relation with the new mass media. The new idea was not only first that one could find models of authenticity in the media, but more spectacularly, second, that the media could be the sphere for becoming authentic by expressing oneself. The media was celebrated as the social forum where agency and autonomy would flourish. The media, it was hoped, could be a tool of authenticity. The first major philosophical concept expressing this view of the media as the space for shaping human agency was Immanuel Kant's public use of reason. In publicly printed books or magazines, Kant hoped individuals would engage in rational discourse to work towards an ever more autonomous society with ever more autonomous people. Much later, Jürgen Habermas picked up the same idea when he idealized the public sphere, or Öffentlichkeit. Kant in the late 18th and Habermas in the late 20th century mark the beginning and the end of the age of authenticity. In terms of media theory, this means the Western Enlightenment hope that the mass media would be fostering a democracy of free and autonomous individuals. At the core of most of 20th century media theory, from Marxism to libertarianism, is the hope that the media empower the people, give them a voice, make them participants and creators. Of course, there are major differences regarding who should own or control the media between more collectives and more individualist approaches. Nevertheless, many 20th century media theorists were, in their respective ways, media liberation theorists. And consequently, most of the 20th century media theory varied one central question. Do the media enhance or diminish our capacity to live authentically and autonomously? Several of the theorists we looked at were deeply pessimistic about the media and found that they hadn't lived up to the expectation of increasing agency and authenticity. Walter Benjamin critically analyzed the capitalist and fascist use of the mass media as a tool to distract, seduce, and exploit people for profit, or worse, for war. Adorno and Horkheimer followed up with a harsh dismissal of the media as the manifestation of a dialectical self-reversal of the Enlightenment. The media utterly failed to liberate and cultivate people. Instead, they turned us into rather mindless industrial beings. Somewhat similarly, Debord regarded the media as the prime manifestation of the spectacle, a new social formation in which all of life has become inauthentic. While the Enlightenment pursuit of liberation, of autonomy, and of the authentic life haunted 20th century media theory, some theoreticians questioned, explicitly or not, the assumption that the media are an authenticity tool. There had been suspicions. Perhaps the media had always already been the tool of inauthenticity. Benjamin had highlighted the whole sphere of authenticity is outside of technical, and of course, not only technical, reproducibility. For him, the mass media, especially movies, were a new form of art that no longer produced originals, but only copies without originals. The notion of copies without originals re-emerged big time in the French thinkers of the second half of the 20th century. Debord introduces the society of the spectacle with this quote from Feuerbach: "The present age prefers the sign to the thing signified, the copy to the original." Baudrillard's central concepts of simulation and hyperreality are both notions of a virtual reality of copies without originals. In effect, all of these ideas reveal the inherent paradox of authenticity. When becoming authentic, for instance by reading about authentic people in novels, we emulate them. Right from the start, we have been copying originality. And what is more, by becoming original in the age of authenticity, we become like everyone else. Authenticity has always already been the copy without original. It dawned on the media theorists of the 20th century that the authenticity-inauthenticity framework that they had inherited from the Enlightenment and applied to the media had all along been the great era, wink, wink, hope you get the illusion here, of media theory. The media, if based on a technology of copies without originals, have always already been beyond authenticity and inauthenticity. This guiding distinction that media theory still often uses today is out of place. If the media, by definition, operate with a technology that cannot be authentic, it's pointless to measure them with the yardstick of authenticity. Media are not inauthentic, but non-authentic. But if the media had never been, and can never be, a tool of authenticity, then what are they? Benjamin provided a clue. He said they produce exhibition value. Debord's notion of the spectacle also points to this idea of exhibition value. The spectacle is there to be seen. It's an exposition. Importantly, both Benjamin's exhibition value and Debord's spectacle do not just describe the new media objectively, they also have a subjective dimension. They refer to what the media do to us, how they affect our self-making. In the media, we present ourselves with our exhibition value in mind. We are not just spectators, but also actors in the spectacle. Benjamin described the rise of a new kind of personality in the film industry. He wrote, "The film responds to the shriveling of the aura with an artificial build-up of a personality outside the studio." As an aside, interestingly enough, Benjamin uses the English word personality here in the original German text. This artificial build-up of a personality outside the studio, he labels the Starkultus, the celebrity cult. In short, the new media, film and photography at Benjamin's times roughly a century ago, and social media today, in a much aggravated and intensified form, are new tools for the shaping of a new type of personal identity. The star, the celebrity. In light of these observations, this is a first core thesis. The new media are misunderstood if we regard them, as mainstream media theory of the 20th century tended to do, as tools of authenticity, and then judge them by reflecting on how they live up to this function. Instead, the new media, already in the 20th century, like film, TV, but especially in the 21st century, with the internet and social media, are tools of profilicity. As McLuhan said, although he actually didn't say this, we shape our tools and thereafter they shape us. In the 21st century, this means we shape the media as tools of profilicity, and in turn, they shape our profiles. Media and profilicity are looped. But what is profilicity? Let me quote again the media theorist who provided the most elaborate conceptual groundwork for defining profilicity, Niklas Luhmann. Luhmann said categorically, the reality of the mass media, this is the reality of second-order observation. We can add, the reality of second-order observation, this is the reality of profilicity. What does this mean? What's the relation between profilicity as an identity technology, the new media, and second-order observation? Well, let's briefly go back to the older identity technologies of sincerity and authenticity. In both sincerity and authenticity, one's identity was validated by being seen by others who are also sincere or respectively authentic. In sincerity, your role identity is validated by others who also identify by their roles. Wives and husbands, children and parents validate one another. Validation happens by present peers. Artisans' guilds were established where professionals validated one another as fellow professionals. Aristocrats validated themselves by conferring titles to one another. Family members, fellow professionals or fellow aristocrats functioned as mutual role mates, mutually confirming their identity. In authenticity, validation happens through recognition, a concept especially elaborated by Hegel, one of the major philosophers of the age of authenticity. Recognition is intersubjective. It also requires a present peer, but not just anyone. You need another authentic individual to recognize your own authenticity. In authenticity, you need an authentic soulmate instead of a sincere role-mate. You need someone who is as special as you so that he or she in turn can truly recognize how special you are. In both sincerity and authenticity, you rely on present peers to validate your identity. You need to be seen by them. These present peers, the role-mates or soulmates, look at one another directly. They relate to one another in the mode of first-order observation. In profilicity, a decisive switch happens. You need to be validated by your peers as well, but curiously, by peers who are not present. You need to be validated by a general peer. Instead of simply being seen by present peers, in profilicity, you are seen as being seen. Think again of the celebrity as an archetype of this identity technology. You cannot relate to celebrities in first-order observation. Only in second-order observation. You never see them directly. You see them as being seen. In profilicity, you adopt the celebrity mode for yourself. You not only look at others, but show yourself in this mode. You create an image of yourself as if you were seen as being seen by a general peer. You see yourself as being seen. And for this shift in identity technology from first to second order observation, we use media technology. The celebrities Benjamin talked about, the movie stars of the 1930s, are an early form of profilic personalities. At that time, profilicity was still young. Only a few people could exercise it. And yet, profilicity was already in full swing, especially in the media. At this period, profiling spread rapidly, but not as much among people as among things, or more precisely, among things that were marketed. Everything was branded. Before people were profiled, products were branded. Before branding, people bought shoes from shoemakers and pots from potters. People went to the market, looked at shoes and pots in the mode of first-order observation, and then bought them. When industrial production and global commerce evolved, branding evolved. And the media, through advertising, were the branding tools. Now, it was not enough to make shoes or pots. You also had to create a brand identity to market them. The economy switched to second-order observation. You don't simply look at a shoe when buying it. You recognize it by its brand, which is known to be known, as Luhmann says, through the media. You've already seen the brand before you see the actual shoe you buy. You have seen it as being seen before you see it with your own eyes. Second-order observation now precedes first-order observation. The second core thesis is this: profilicity is not a creation of the media. Instead, the media developed in the way they did because of profilicity. Already early in the 20th century, profilicity was on the rise in the form of celebrities in art, and even more importantly, in the form of branding in the economy. The new media, including film and TV and today's social media, developed as technologies to create brands and celebrities, or profiles. In identity building, both of commodities and of personalities, we switched from first to second order observation, from sincerity and authenticity to profilicity. And we use our new media technologies to support our new identity technology. Media and identity technologies are looped. One final thing. When I say that in profilicity we build or create our identity in the form of profiles like celebrities or brands, then this does not mean we do so only on social media. Of course, we do so especially on social media, where most of us, including myself, have multiple profiles. And yes, the word profilicity is derived from such profiles. But as a basic identity technology, profilicity is not just an online thing. It equally works offline. In the offline world, we still frequently interact with present peers, and we still use sincerity with our role mates and authenticity with our soulmates. And we do so in the mode of first-order observation. But increasingly, we model our interactions with present peers on our interaction with a general peer. We act in the mode of profilicity also in real life. We act in real life as if we were on Instagram or Facebook. In a recent special issue on profilicity in the literature studies journal Concentric, Katja Kauer analyzes modern and contemporary novels and stories. She shows how many protagonists behave as though there were always a camera pointed at them. We no longer learn from literature or movies or online videos how to become authentic. We learn from them how to be profilic. As Katja Kauer says, the general peer becomes an internalized agent whom we perform for. We shape the media as a tool for creating profilicity. In turn, the media shape us, including our offline personalities, in the mode of profilicity. I'll outline this in more detail in the next, probably final video of this series.